All right, in this video, we're going to be looking at two different phyla, Placozoa and Tardigrada. They are not part of Porifera, even though this says Unit 3 Porifera. These are their own phyla. They're kind of just a catch-all today. They don't really fit anywhere in the sponge category, but it's just a way to talk about these, and this is as good a place as any. Placozoa are the flat animals, and Tardigrada are the water bears. All right, so Placozoa as a species, it's a phyla with one species in it. It was proposed in the 1971 that this phyla would contain a single species, Trichoplax adhaerens, and it's a tiny marine animal. A couple things about this tiny marine animal. It has a plate-like body with no symmetry. Plate-like meaning like the shape of a plate, just a round little flat thing. No organs, muscles, nerves, anything like that. Very simple. It lacks a dermal layer, but you can see it has an epidermis top and bottom. It's called the dorsal and ventral epidermises, respectively. The dorsal epidermis has these spherical structures called bright spheres. Not real sure what their purpose is. Some of the thought on that is that these are maybe anti-predatory devices. And so that's the common thought there. The ventral epidermis contains ciliated cells, and these ciliated cells allow the organism to move in its environment. The cells on the in-between here are multinucleated cells, very similar to the syncytium that we saw in sponges, and they contain numerous contractile vacuoles. If you remember your cell biology, a vacuole is a storage unit. And so a contractile vacuole is kind of like an area that brings in water and then propels it out, pushes it out, contracts to push it out. And so this allows the organism to move in its environment as a system for propulsion. It's also used to get rid of waste as well. These animals are considered diploblastic, meaning that they have two tissue layers, but very, very loose definition of that. As far as a couple of their functions for feeding, this is a picture of them feeding. Here's another picture in another language, but I think I can pick out most of this. This is food particle. Particle of food. Alimentary is like an alimentary canal. And so this Trichoplax here will actually kind of crawl over that food particle and basically form a little digestive cavity here and secrete enzymes into that area, and then that will break the food down, and then they will suck up all of those digestive juices there, and that's how they eat. For reproduction, they are asexual. They have something called swarmer cells, and they produce these cells and allows them to have kind of a budding. One interesting thing is that eggs have been observed in the lab, but no sexual reproduction has been observed, meaning there hasn't been observed sperm cells fertilizing egg cells, but because they did find egg cells, sexual reproduction can be inferred. All right, so a little bit about their phylogeny. So you can see here, you have Porifera. There's, this is the choanocytes here, and then you have this common ancestor here, all animals, Porifera here. And so Placozoa shares a common ancestor with Ctenophores, which are comb jellies we'll talk about in the next unit, and Cnidarians, which are your standard jellies. And so they share a common ancestor with both of the jelly phyla. So let's look at Phylum Tardigrada. The name Tardigrada literally means slow step, but they are commonly referred to as water bears. You can see here is a electron microscope picture on the left and just a standard light microscope on the right. Very simple sorts of organisms, but a lot more complex than anything that we've looked at so far. They kind of really don't fit as far as in the line of phylogeny, but this is as good a place to talk about them as any other place. They are less than 1 millimeter in size, so really small. Approximately 900 species of Tardigrada are out there. They live in water. the kind of the film surrounding moss and lichens on damp soils. Some of them are marine, but for the most part, these are freshwater species and live on or near moss and lichens. And so very, very specific sort of place that they live. They have an unsegmented body that is cylindrical. So you can see here, it looks segmented, but I guess it's just skin folds. They're covered in a cuticle, and so cuticle is like a non-living kind of covering. Here's a picture of them on some mosses and things, just chilling, being water bears. So this non-living cuticle is molted. And if I can go back to this picture, you can kind of see some claws here. And so when it molts this non-living structure, it's almost like an exoskeleton, and it molts the claws as well. And so I'm assuming that it does that when it needs to grow. For its mouth, it uses its mouth to kind of suck the juices out of the plants that it's eating. It has some muscular structure, relatively large brain, actually, for the size of organism that we are dealing with. Separate sexes in most species of Tardigrada, and in some freshwater species, the males are unknown. And so what likely is occurring is parthenogenesis with the females. Just because they're unknown doesn't mean they're not out there, but more than likely, what's occurring is just parthenogenesis, which is, remember, essentially sexual reproduction without fertilization, which is pretty interesting. One very interesting subject here with water bears is they are one of the most, I don't know, not versatile, but one of the most hardy species on Earth. They are able to enter into a state of suspended animation called cryptobiosis, which allows them to withstand some of the harshest conditions on Earth. They can survive with just 3% of their body being water, so almost completely dried out, so just completely desiccated. They can survive a negative 272 degrees Celsius, which is quite cold, quite cold, and they can survive up to 149 degrees Celsius, which is way above the boiling point of water. And so these little guys are quite hardy. They would be around long after anything else, any other animals on Earth would be around. And so they deserve some sort of award for that, at least.